The moment I bought that 5-acre property on the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado, I thought I had finally escaped the nightmare of sharing walls with neighbors, but I was wrong in ways I could never have imagined. My name is Frank Forrester, and I am a self-employed software developer who had spent the last decade living in cramped apartments and townhouses, always dreaming of wide open spaces. When I found this property in 2024, complete with a small house, a barn, and enough land to breathe without smelling someone else's cooking, I jumped on it. The property sat on the edge of what used to be farmland, now partially developed into a residential community called Meadowbrook Heights. My land ran along the western boundary of their neighborhood, separated by a clearly marked property line that had been surveyed multiple times over the years. The previous owner, an elderly farmer named Mr. Henderson, had owned this land for 40 years before selling it to me. He warned me about the HOA next door. They have been eyeing this property for years, he told me during the closing. Tried to get me to sell to their developer friends for half what it was worth. They will probably give you trouble, son. I should have listened more carefully. The first month was peaceful. I spent my days fixing up the house, updating the plumbing and setting up my home office. The barn needed work, but it was structurally sound. I planned to convert part of it into a workshop. My property had its own driveway that connected directly to County Road 47, a public road that ran perpendicular to Meadowbrook Heights. I had no reason to interact with the HOA, and they had no jurisdiction over my land. Then winter arrived early that year. By mid-November, we were already getting heavy snowfalls. I had purchased a used Ford F-350 with a plow attachment from a local farmer who was upgrading his equipment. The truck was a beast, dark blue with some rust around the wheel wells, but the engine purred like a kitten and the plow was in excellent condition. I spent a weekend learning how to properly attach and operate it, practicing on my long driveway. The first real storm hit on a Tuesday morning. 18 inches of heavy, wet snow blanketed everything. I woke up at 5 in the morning, made coffee, and headed out to clear my driveway. The work was satisfying, watching the snow pile up in neat rows along the edges of my property. My driveway was about a quarter-mile long, and it took me nearly 2 hours to clear it properly, including the area around my barn and the section near my house. I had just finished and was sitting in my warm kitchen, enjoying a second cup of coffee, when someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. I opened it to find a woman in her late 40s, wearing an expensive-looking purple parka and boots that had probably never seen actual snow before today. Her blonde hair was styled in that particular way that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and her face was already twisted in annoyance. "Are you the new owner?" she demanded, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or good morning. "I am Frank. Can I help you?" "I am Linda Kensington, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. We have a situation that needs immediate attention." I waited. She seemed to expect me to invite her in, but something about her tone made me want to keep the door between us. "Our community parking lot is completely snowed in," she continued, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "We saw you have a plow truck. We need you to clear it immediately." I blinked. "Your parking lot, that is in your HOA community, right?" "Yes, obviously." "And since you are the only person in the immediate area with snow removal equipment, we expect you to handle it. It is the neighborly thing to do." "Do you have a snow removal service?" Her eyes narrowed. "We did. They went out of business last month. We are currently looking for a replacement, but in the meantime, we need the parking cleared. Some of our residents have important places to be." "I see. Well, I wish you luck finding someone. There are several snow removal companies in Boulder. I can give you some numbers if you want." Linda's face flushed red. "Excuse me. We are not asking for a referral. We are telling you that as a property owner adjacent to our community, you have a responsibility to help maintain safe access." "Actually, I do not. I am not part of your HOA. My property is private." "That is a very selfish attitude, Mr. Forrester. We are talking about people's safety here. What if someone has a medical emergency? Then they should call an ambulance. The main roads are being cleared by the county. Look, Mrs. Kensington, I sympathize with your situation, but I spent 2 hours clearing my own property this morning. I'm not a snow removal service." She crossed her arms. "We are prepared to pay you $50. I almost laughed. $50. You know how large your parking lot is. I drove past it when I was looking at properties. That would take at least 3 hours of work, probably more, plus fuel, wear on my equipment. A professional service would charge you at least $500, probably closer to $800. That is outrageous. We are a community on a budget." "Then maybe you should have kept your snow removal service. I am sorry, but I cannot help you." I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. "This is not over. You have a responsibility to this community." "No, I really do not. Please move your foot." She glared at me for a long moment before stepping back. "You will regret this. I promise you that." I closed the door and watched through the window as she marched back to a white Lexus SUV that was parked at the end of my driveway, right where my property met the county road. She spun her tires getting out, spraying snow everywhere. The next day, I received a certified letter. It was from the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, addressed to me at my property. I signed for it and opened it at my kitchen table, already annoyed. The letter informed me that, due to my property's proximity to their community, I was being strongly encouraged to participate in their snow removal cooperative. It went on to explain that all properties within a certain radius had an implied responsibility to maintain safe conditions for the greater community. The letter was full of legal-sounding language, but cited no actual laws or statutes. At the bottom, Linda Kensington had signed her name with an aggressive flourish. I crumpled it up and threw it away. Over the next week, 3 more storms hit. Each time I cleared my own property and ignored the increasingly frantic messages left on my phone. Linda called 6 times. Other HOA board members called. One woman left a sobbing message about how her daughter could not get to work because the parking lot was impassable. I felt bad, but not bad enough to spend hours of my time and my money clearing their property for free or for insultingly low offers. What really got under my skin was that they kept parking at the end of my driveway. Every morning, I would find 2 or 3 cars sitting right at the boundary line, their owners apparently walking through the snow to get to the main road where the county plows kept things clear. They were using my property as a parking area without permission. I put up a "No Parking Private Property" sign. They ignored it. I called the county sheriff. A deputy came out, looked at the situation, and told me that technically the cars were not on my property. They were on the county road shoulder. There was nothing he could do unless they were actually on my land. The next storm brought 2 feet of snow. It was a Friday, and I had a video conference meeting that morning that I could not miss. I decided to plow after lunch. But when I finally got outside around 1 in the afternoon, I found Linda Kensington standing in my driveway with 2 other people. A man in his 50s wearing a suit under his winter coat, and a younger woman with a clipboard. "Mr. Forrester," Linda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This is Robert Mitchell, our HOA attorney, and Jennifer, our community manager. We need to discuss your continued refusal to assist your neighbors." My answer has not changed. Please get off my property. Robert stepped forward. Mr. Forrester, I have been reviewing the property records, and there is some ambiguity about the exact boundary line between your property and the HOA common areas. Specifically, the parking lot may actually extend onto what you believe is your land. That got my attention. Excuse me. He pulled out some papers from his briefcase. The original survey from 1982 shows some discrepancies with the current survey. We believe that a portion of your driveway may actually be part of the HOA property, which would make you subject to HOA rules and regulations. I stared at him. That is complete nonsense. I have a current survey from 3 months ago. The boundary line is clearly marked. You are on my property right now, and you need to leave. We are prepared to file a lawsuit to resolve this boundary dispute, Robert continued. However, if you were willing to provide snow removal services for a reasonable fee, we might be willing to let this matter drop. It clicked. They were threatening me with a bogus lawsuit to try to force me to plow their parking lot. Anger surged through me, hot and sharp. Get off my property, now, Linda smiled. Or what? You will call the police. We are simply having a conversation. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Yes, I have trespassers on my property who are refusing to leave and threatening me with frivolous lawsuits. That got them moving. They hurried back to their vehicles, Linda shouting something about me being unreasonable. I stayed on the line until the dispatcher confirmed a deputy was on the way, then gave a full report to the officer when he arrived 20 minutes later. Deputy Martinez was in his 30s, professional and thorough. He took notes, photographed the tire tracks in my driveway, and took copies of the threatening letter and the boundary dispute claims. Sounds like they are trying to harass you into doing what they want, he said. Keep documenting everything. If they come back, call us immediately. If they file the lawsuit, you will need to get a lawyer. That evening, I called my real estate attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Huang who had handled my property purchase. I explained the situation, and she was not happy. This is harassment, plain and simple, she said. Your survey is recent and was done by a licensed surveyor. There is no legitimate boundary dispute. If they file, we will countersue for harassment and legal fees. But Frank, be careful. HOAs can be vindictive even when they are wrong. The lawsuit arrived the following Monday. It was everything Robert had threatened, claiming boundary disputes, demanding access to my property for surveying, and asking for a court order compelling me to provide snow removal services as part of a community safety initiative. It was 20 pages of legal nonsense. Patricia filed a response and a countersuit. She also got me in touch with a surveyor who had worked on the property before, a grizzled man named Tom who had been surveying land in Boulder County for 30 years. He came out, checked all his markers, and confirmed what I already knew: the boundary line was exactly where my survey said it was. The HOA parking lot was entirely on HOA property, and my land was entirely my own. I remember when they developed Meadowbrook Heights. Tom told me as we stood in the cold, looking at the brass survey markers embedded in concrete along the property line. The developer was very careful about the boundaries because Old Man Henderson, the guy you bought from, refused to sell them a single inch of his land. He hated HOAs. These markers are solid. There is no dispute. Can you testify to that in court if needed? Absolutely. I will bring all my records. This HOA is full of it, pardon my language. Things escalated from there. Linda started a campaign on the HOA's private social media group, painting me as a heartless neighbor who refused to help the community. I only knew about it because one of the HOA residents, A kind elderly man named George, who lived on the edge of the development, knocked on my door one evening to apologize. "I want you to know not everyone agrees with Linda," he said. "A lot of us think she is out of line. But she has a way of getting people riled up. She is telling everyone you are trying to steal HOA land. That is the opposite of what is happening. I know. I saw the original development plans. Your land was never part of the HOA. Linda just cannot stand not getting her way." Another storm hit that Wednesday. This one was particularly bad, a genuine Colorado blizzard that shut down most of Boulder. I spent the day inside, working on a project for a client in California, watching the snow pile up outside my windows. By evening, there was close to 3 feet of accumulation, with drifts much higher. Thursday morning dawned clear and brutally cold. I bundled up and headed out to my truck around 7 in the morning. The plow attachment was already mounted from the previous storm. I started the engine, let it warm up, and began the slow process of clearing my driveway. It took almost 4 hours. The snow was heavy and deep, and I had to make multiple passes to push it all to the sides. I cleared my driveway from the county road to my house, then cleared around my barn and the area where I parked my other vehicle, a Subaru Outback that I used for normal driving when I did not need the truck. As I was finishing up, I noticed something that made me stop and stare. Someone had spray painted a message on the snowbank at the end of my driveway, visible from my house. "Selfish prick," it read in bright orange letters. I sat in my truck, staring at that message, feeling my temper rise. I had tried to be reasonable. I had explained why I could not and should not be expected to clear their private parking lot. I had every right to use my equipment on my own property. And this was how they responded. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the graffiti. Then I called Deputy Martinez and filed another report. He came out, took his own pictures, and added it to the growing file. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "I am going to have a talk with the HOA president. This is harassment. Good luck with that. She does not listen to reason." That afternoon, I got a call from Patricia. "The judge wants to see everyone for a preliminary hearing next Monday. Just a status update, nothing major. But you should be there." The hearing was in the Boulder County Courthouse, a modern building that always felt too cold no matter the season. I met Patricia in the lobby, and we went through security together. She was carrying a briefcase full of documents, surveys, photos, and evidence of the HOA's harassment. Linda was there with Robert and 2 other HOA board members. She was wearing a business suit and had toned down her aggressive attitude for the court. When she saw me, she gave me a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, called us into her chambers rather than holding a formal courtroom hearing. She had clearly reviewed the case and was not impressed with what she had seen. "Let me be clear," she said, looking over her reading glasses at Robert. "I have reviewed both the original complaint and the response. Mr. Mitchell, your boundary dispute claims appear to be without merit. The surveys are clear, recent, and properly documented. Do you have any actual evidence of a boundary issue?" Robert shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, we believe that a historical review of the property records will show that the boundary has shifted over time due to various factors, such as erosion, changes in the landscape, the natural movement of the earth over decades." Judge Morrison looked at him like he had suggested the earth was flat. "Counsel, this property is in Colorado, not California. We do not have earthquakes that shift property boundaries. The survey markers are in concrete. Unless you have actual evidence that those markers were moved, I am prepared to dismiss this portion of your suit right now." Linda leaned over and whispered urgently to Robert. He nodded and turned back to the judge. Your Honor, even if the boundary is not in dispute, we believe there is still a matter of community responsibility. Mr. Forrester has snow removal equipment, and his refusal to assist the community during dangerous weather conditions represents a public safety hazard. Is Mr. Forrester part of your HOA? No, but his property is adjacent to our community, and we believe that creates certain obligations. Based on what statute or ordinance? Robert fumbled with his papers again. There is precedent for neighbors assisting each other during emergencies. Assisting is voluntary, Mr. Mitchell. You cannot compel someone to provide services on private property that is not under your jurisdiction. Does your HOA have the funds to hire a professional snow removal service? We are currently facing budget constraints due to other necessary expenditures. That is not Mr. Forrester's problem. Unless you have some actual legal basis for this suit, I am going to dismiss it with prejudice. And if I see anything that looks like continued harassment of Mr. Forrester, I will be very unhappy. Am I making myself clear? Robert nodded stiffly. Linda looked like she had swallowed a lemon. The judge turned to me and Patricia. Mr. Forrester, I understand you have filed a countersuit for harassment and legal fees. Patricia stood. Yes, Your Honor. Our client has been subjected to repeated trespassing, threats of frivolous litigation, vandalism of his property, and a coordinated harassment campaign. We are seeking damages and an injunction preventing further contact except through legal counsel. I am going to grant the injunction effective immediately. The HOA and its representatives are not to contact Mr. Forrester directly, not to enter his property, and not to make any public statements about him or this case. Mr. Mitchell, explain that to your clients in small words. As for damages, we will address that if this goes to trial. I am giving both sides 2 weeks to see if you can reach a settlement. If not, we will set a trial date. Understood? Everyone nodded. Outside the courthouse, Linda tried to approach me, but Patricia stepped between us. The judge just issued an order, Mrs. Kensington. Do not violate it. Linda glared but walked away. I watched her climb into her Lexus and drive off too quickly, tires squealing. That went well, Patricia said. They have no case. They will probably try to settle. I do not want their money. I just want them to leave me alone. We will see what happens. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. And Frank, be careful. People like Linda do not like losing. She was right to warn me. That weekend, someone slashed 2 of my truck tires. Both the back tires on the driver's side were cut deep, completely destroyed. I found them Saturday morning when I went out to go grocery shopping. I called the sheriff immediately. This time, they sent a detective, a serious man named Detective Walsh who specialized in property crimes. He examined the tires, took photos, and collected what he said might be trace evidence from the knife or whatever tool had been used. This is clearly related to your ongoing dispute with the HOA, he said. We are going to start an investigation. Do you have any security cameras? No, but I am going to get some installed immediately. Good idea. In the meantime, is there anyone specific you suspect? Linda Kensington has made multiple threats, but I cannot prove she did this herself. Leave the investigating to us. Get those cameras up and call us if anything else happens. I spent the rest of the weekend installing a comprehensive security system. 6 cameras covering all approaches to my house, barn, and driveway, all recording to a cloud storage system that would preserve evidence even if someone destroyed the physical cameras. The cameras had night vision and motion detection. I also installed motion sensor lights around my property. The cameras paid off faster than I expected. Tuesday night, around 2 in the morning, motion alerts woke me up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feeds. A figure in dark clothing was creeping around my barn, spray paint can in hand. I could not see their face because they were wearing a ski mask, but their build and movements suggested a man, medium height, probably middle-aged based on the way he moved. I called 911 while watching him on my phone. He was spray painting something on the side of my barn. Deputies arrived within 10 minutes while the vandal was still there. I watched on my phone as they surrounded him and ordered him to the ground. He tried to run but slipped in the snow and was quickly handcuffed. The next morning, Detective Walsh called me. We got him. His name is Brian Kensington. Ring any bells? My heart sank. Linda's husband, the same. He has confessed to the spray paint tonight but denies the tire slashing. We are working on that. He is being charged with trespassing, vandalism, and criminal mischief for now. We are also investigating his wife's involvement. The messages he painted and the things he said when we arrested him suggest he was acting on her instructions, but he is not saying that explicitly. What did he paint? More insults. Nothing that would rise to the level of threats, unfortunately. But combined with everything else, it builds a pattern of harassment. Brian made bail the next day, but the damage was done. The HOA residents started to learn what was happening behind the scenes. George, the elderly neighbor who had warned me before, came by with a petition signed by 30 of the 75 homes in Meadowbrook Heights, demanding Linda's resignation as HOA president. Most people did not know what she was doing, George explained. When they found out she and her husband were vandalizing your property and threatening you, they were horrified. This is not what our community is about. I appreciate that, George. I never wanted any of this trouble. I know. Linda has always been controlling, but this crossed so many lines. There is an emergency HOA meeting tonight to vote on her removal. That evening, I received an email from the HOA's general inbox. It was brief and formal. Linda Kensington had been removed as president, effective immediately. The board apologized for the harassment I had endured and assured me that they were hiring a professional snow removal service and would not contact me again except to resolve the legal matters. Patricia called me right after. Did you see? They are offering a settlement. $15,000 for your legal fees and damages, plus a formal written apology and a permanent injunction against contact. It is a good offer, Frank. What about the criminal charges against Brian? Those are separate. The district attorney is handling that. But this would resolve the civil matters. I thought about it. $15,000 would more than cover my legal fees, my new tires, and my security cameras with money left over. More importantly, it would end this nightmare. Accept it. I just want this to be over. The settlement was finalized within a week. The HOA paid, I signed the agreement, and Patricia filed the dismissal of the countersuit. Brian Kensington eventually pleaded guilty to vandalism and criminal trespass, and was sentenced to probation and community service. The tire slashing charge was dropped due to lack of direct evidence, though everyone knew he had done it. Linda and Brian moved out of Meadowbrook Heights in February. I heard through George that they had relocated to Denver, where presumably Linda could find a new HOA to terrorize. But the story does not end there. In early March, another significant storm rolled through. By this point, the HOA had a contract with a reputable snow removal company, and I had no reason to think about their parking lot. I woke up early on a Friday morning to clear my own property, as I had been doing all winter. I was halfway through plowing my driveway when I noticed something odd. The snow removal company's truck was parked at the entrance to Meadowbrook Heights, but the driver was just sitting there, not working. I finished my pass and drove my truck over to see what was going on. The driver, a young guy probably in his 20s, rolled down his window when he saw me approach. "Hey, are you the owner of this property?" He pointed to my land. "Yes, I am Frank. What is going on?" "The HOA hasn't paid us in 2 months. We came out today, but our boss said not to plow until they clear their account. I am just waiting to see if anyone calls with payment." I sighed. The HOA had spent $15,000 on their settlement with me, plus legal fees for their own attorney. Apparently, that had drained their budget more than they expected. "That is not my problem," I said. "I am not part of the HOA. "I know, man. I heard about all that drama. Just figured I would let you know what is going on." I nodded and drove back to finish clearing my property. As I worked, an idea formed. It was petty. It was probably unnecessary. But after everything I had been through, I felt entitled to a little bit of petness. When I finished clearing my driveway and the area around my buildings, I did not stop. I kept going, using my plow to create a massive, perfect berm of snow exactly along the property line between my land and the HOA parking lot. I piled it high, at least 6 feet tall in places, using every bit of snow from my property to create an impenetrable wall. On my side of the line, everything was clear, pristine, and easily accessible. On their side, the parking lot remained buried under 2 feet of snow, now blocked from my property by a wall that would take hours to remove even with proper equipment. I made sure the berm was precisely on the property line, not an inch over onto HOA land. Tom, the surveyor, had marked the line clearly, and I followed his markers exactly. When I was done, I parked my truck, went inside and made coffee. The phone calls started within an hour. The new HOA president, a reasonable man named David who lived 3 houses down from George, called me personally. "Frank, I know you have every right to do what you did, but is there any chance you would help us out? We are in a bind with the snow removal company, and we just need a few days to get the funds together." "David, I like you. You seem reasonable, but I am not getting involved with HOA business ever again. I cleared my property line. What happens on your side of the line is your responsibility." He sighed. "I understand. I am sorry about everything Linda put you through." "I appreciate that. Good luck with the snow." I watched from my window as residents came out to look at the wall of snow along the property line. Some took pictures. A few tried to start clearing it by hand, but quickly realized how futile that was. The snow removal company remained parked at the entrance, driver still waiting for payment authorization. By noon, someone must have found emergency funds somewhere because the snow removal truck finally started working. It took them the entire afternoon to clear the HOA parking lot and the massive berm I had created. I watched it all from my warm house, drinking coffee and working on my laptop. George stopped by that evening, shaking his head but smiling. "That was quite a statement you made today, Frank. I just cleared my property line. Nothing wrong with that. Technically true. You know you are going to become a legend in this community, right? The guy who built a wall of snow to prove a point." "I just want to be left alone, George. I think you will be from now on. David is not like Linda. He is already working on rebuilding the HOA's financial situation. We should have the snow removal contract paid up within the week." "Good for you all. I mean that sincerely." He patted my shoulder. "You are a good neighbor, Frank. Even if you do not want to be neighborly with the HOA, what you did today was fair. We made our bed with Linda's nonsense. We have to lie in it now." Spring came eventually, as it always does in Colorado. The snow melted, revealing the damage winter had done to various properties. My land looked good, all things considered. The barn needed some minor repairs, but nothing major. In April, I received a final piece of correspondence from the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. It was a formal letter on official letterhead, signed by David and the entire board. They apologized again for everything that had happened, acknowledged that I had every right to manage my property as I saw fit, and formally committed to never involving me in HOA business again. They also included a gift certificate to a nice restaurant in Boulder as a peace offering. I accepted it in the spirit it was given. David seemed like a good guy trying to clean up someone else's mess. The criminal case against Brian Kensington concluded in May. He completed his probation and community service without incident. I never saw Linda or Brian again, though I occasionally heard through George that they were having issues with their new HOA in Denver. Some people never learn. As summer arrived, I finally finished converting part of the barn into the workshop I had always wanted. I set up tools, workbenches, and a small forge for metalworking, a hobby I had picked up years ago but never had space to pursue properly. Life settled into a comfortable routine of work, hobbies, and enjoying my property. One Saturday in June, I was working in the barn when George stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and a proposition. "Some of us in the HOA were talking," he said, handing me a cold bottle. "We know you want nothing to do with HOA business, and we respect that. But we were wondering if you might be interested in a purely commercial arrangement. We need snow removal again this coming winter. Our current company is fine, but expensive. If you were willing to do it as a side business, we would pay you a fair rate. $75 per hour, paid promptly, with a contract that makes it clear you are an independent contractor with no other obligations to the HOA." I considered it while sipping the beer. It was a beautiful afternoon, warm but not hot, with a breeze coming down from the mountains. "What is the catch?" "No catch. You would bill us like any other contractor. We pay within 30 days. If we do not pay, you stop plowing. Simple business arrangement." David insisted on it. He wants to build a better relationship with you, even if it is just commercial. And what is in it for me besides the money? Honestly, it would be cheaper than what we are paying now, but still fair to you. And we figured you are already plowing your own property. Might as well make some money doing our lot while you are at it. I thought about it for a long moment. $75 per hour was reasonable for the work and equipment. A typical plowing of their parking lot would take about 3 hours, so around $225 per storm. Over a winter season with regular storms, that could add up to a few $1,000s. Not life-changing money, but decent supplemental income for work I was already doing nearby. I wanted in writing. A formal contract. I am an independent contractor, no other relationship with the HOA. I work when I want, and if payment is ever late, I am done. Also, I want to be paid per job, not per hour, because I am not tracking my time that carefully. $250 per plowing, regardless of how long it takes me, George smiled. That is actually better for our budgeting. I will have David draw up a contract. We will get it to you by next week. The contract arrived 5 days later. Patricia reviewed it for me at no charge. "This is actually a good agreement," she said. "Very clear, very fair. If you want the work, I see no issues with it." I signed it and sent it back. That winter, I plowed the HOA parking lot 14 times. They paid promptly after each job, usually within 2 weeks. It was easy money, and it had the bonus of keeping me in good standing with my neighbors without any of the drama. The relationship with Meadowbrook Heights settled into something unusual but functional. I was not part of their community, but I was not hostile to them either. Occasionally, George or David would wave when they saw me on the county road. Sometimes in summer, I would get invitations to the HOA's community events, which I politely declined. They respected my boundaries, and I respected theirs. In the spring of the following year, I started dating someone I had met at a local coffee shop in Boulder. Her name was Laura Kendrick, and she was a landscape architect who worked for a firm specializing in sustainable mountain properties. When I told her the story of the HOA war and the Great Snow Berm incident, she laughed so hard she nearly cried. "You are telling me you built a 6-foot wall of snow just to make a point," she said, wiping her eyes. "It was precisely on the property line. Perfectly legal." "Oh, I am not criticizing. I think it is hilarious. I just cannot believe how petty HOAs can be. You have no idea." Laura ended up moving in with me that fall. She loved the property, the space, the barn, and the mountain views. She immediately started planning improvements to the landscaping, talking about native plants and sustainable water features. It was nice having someone to share the place with. The HOA changed over the years. David remained president for 2 terms before passing the torch to someone else. George eventually became treasurer. The community stabilized under better leadership. They never asked me to join, and I never wanted to. Our commercial arrangement for snow plowing continued for several years, until I eventually sold the truck and hired the same company they used. My back was not getting any younger, and the early morning plowing was getting harder each year. Years later, long after the drama had faded into a funny story we told at dinner parties, I would sometimes drive past the property line and remember that March morning when I built a wall of snow to prove a point. It was petty. It was unnecessary. But damn, it felt good. The lesson I learned from all of it was simple. Property rights matter. Boundaries matter. And sometimes, when someone pushes you far enough, it is okay to push back, as long as you do it legally and precisely on your side of the line. Linda never bothered me again after moving to Denver. I heard through the grapevine that she eventually got banned from her new HOA board for similar harassment of other residents. Some people attract drama wherever they go. Brian, as far as I know, stayed out of trouble after his probation ended. I never bore him any real ill will. He had been following his wife's lead, which did not excuse his actions but explained them. The settlement money went toward more improvements on my property. I upgraded the barn's electrical system, installed better insulation, and built a proper workshop that became my favorite place to spend evenings and weekends. Laura used her expertise to create beautiful landscaping that attracted birds and wildlife. We even put in a small pond that filled with snowmelt each spring. Patricia became a friend after the case ended. She occasionally stopped by for dinner when she was out of the city. She loved to tell other lawyers about the case, usually over drinks, laughing about the ridiculousness of the HOA's boundary dispute claims. She said it was one of the most clear-cut harassment cases she had ever seen, and Judge Morrison's response had been appropriately harsh. Detective Walsh closed the investigation after Brian's plea deal. He told me later that he had suspected Linda's direct involvement, but could never prove it beyond Brian's actions. Sometimes justice is imperfect, but at least there was some accountability. The security cameras I had installed remained up and functioning. They never caught anything more dramatic than the occasional deer or coyote wandering through my property at night. But they gave me peace of mind, and the footage of Brian's arrest remained backed up in my cloud storage, a reminder that documentation matters. Tom the surveyor retired a few years after my case. Before he did, he came by one last time to verify all the property markers were still in good condition. "These should last another 50 years at least," he told me. "And if you ever have boundary issues again, just show people the court records from this case." Judge Morrison's ruling is clear as day. I never had boundary issues again. The property line was marked, documented, and legally affirmed. Future HOA boards knew better than to challenge it. The wall of snow I had built became something of a local legend, mentioned occasionally in neighborhood gossip and HOA meetings as a cautionary tale about respecting property rights. Looking back on everything, I realized that buying that property was one of the best decisions I ever made, despite the initial drama. I got my wide open spaces, my privacy, and my peace. Laura and I built a life there together, away from the noise and crowds of the city, but close enough to enjoy Boulder's amenities when we wanted them. The irony was not lost on me that I eventually ended up doing exactly what Linda had originally demanded, plowing the HOA parking lot. But it happened on my terms for fair compensation under a proper contract. That made all the difference. It was not about the work itself. It was about respect, boundaries, and not being bullied into submission. Some people ask if I regret buying property next to an HOA. The answer is no. My land is my own, governed by my rules and preferences. The HOA next door is their business, not mine. We coexist peacefully because both sides learn to respect boundaries, both literal and figurative. The story could have ended badly. If Linda had been more clever or less aggressive, she might have found ways to make my life miserable without breaking laws. If Brian had done more serious damage, the consequences could have been worse. If the HOA residents had supported Linda's harassment campaign instead of rejecting it, I might have been forced to sell and move. But none of that happened. The system worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it worked. The courts protected my property rights. The police investigated the crimes. The HOA residents held their leaders accountable. And I learned that standing firm on principle, even when it is difficult, sometimes pays off. Years later, when Laura and I were sitting on our porch one winter evening, watching snow fall over the mountains, she asked me if I would do anything differently. I thought about it for a long moment, watching the snowflakes drift down in the porch light. Maybe I would have installed the security cameras sooner, but otherwise, no. Every step I took was necessary to defend my property and my rights, including the snow berm, she laughed. Especially the snow berm, that was brilliant. It was petty. It was brilliant and petty. The best kind of revenge. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate. My truck was parked in the barn now, no plow attached. The HOA's contracted snow removal service would handle their parking lot in the morning. My driveway would wait until the storm passed. There was no rush, no pressure, no one demanding anything of me, just peace, quiet, and the gentle sound of snow falling on my property. My property. Those two words meant more to me than ever before. The story of the HOA war spread beyond Meadowbrook Heights. Local news picked it up at some point, running a human interest piece about property rights and HOA overreach. They interviewed me, David, and even Patricia. The article was balanced, showing both the ridiculousness of Linda's harassment campaign and the eventual resolution through proper legal channels. The attention was uncomfortable but brief. Within a week, the news cycle moved on to other stories. But the article remained online, occasionally resurfacing when someone searched for HOA horror stories or property rights issues in Colorado. I received emails from people around the country dealing with similar situations, asking for advice. My response was always the same: document everything. Know your property boundaries. Stand firm on your legal rights. Get a good attorney. Do not let bullies intimidate you into giving up what is rightfully yours. Some thank me for the advice. Others shared their own stories, many worse than mine. HOAs demanding access to private property for community improvements. Boards filing frivolous liens. Presidents threatening homeowners with fines for violations that did not exist. The abuse of power was common, enabled by laws that gave HOAs broad authority over their members. But I was not a member. That made all the difference. The property I had bought came without HOA strings attached, and I fought to keep it that way. Others were not so lucky, trapped in communities where the HOA had legitimate authority over their homes. I felt fortunate, not just for winning my battle, but for having the resources and knowledge to fight it. A lawyer, money for legal fees, the ability to install security cameras and take time off work for court appearances. Not everyone had those advantages. The system was not equally fair to everyone. Still, the outcome was satisfying. Justice served, boundaries respected, and peace restored. The snow berm became the exclamation point on the whole story, a visible, dramatic statement that I would not be pushed around. It was theatrical, unnecessary, and absolutely perfect. As I finish this account, several years after the events, I am sitting in my workshop on a cool autumn evening. Laura is in the house, probably reading or working on landscape designs. The property is quiet except for the wind in the trees and the distant sound of traffic on the county road. My land remains my own. The survey markers are still in place, solid and undisputed. The HOA next door functions under competent leadership, and we maintain our professional, distant relationship. The truck that started this whole saga was sold years ago to another farmer, hopefully giving someone else good service. But the lesson remains. Property rights are worth defending. Boundaries matter. And sometimes, when pushed too far, it is okay to build a wall of snow exactly where your property ends, leaving the other side buried in their own problems. That is the American way, after all. Your land, your rules, your responsibility. The HOA learned that lesson the hard way, and I am grateful I was in a position to teach it to them. Not with aggression or illegal action, but with precise, legal, boundary-respecting pettiness. The snow berm stood for 3 days before the HOA finally cleared it. During those 3 days, it served as a perfect monument to property rights, visible from the county road, photographed by dozens of residents and talked about throughout Boulder County. Some people thought I was a hero. Others thought I was petty and mean. I did not care about either opinion. I knew I was right. That was enough. The property line was the property line. They had no authority over my land, and when they tried to force the issue through harassment, vandalism, and frivolous lawsuits, they learned that I would defend what was mine. Looking back now, I wish it had not come to all that. I wish Linda had simply accepted my first refusal and found another solution for her snow removal problem. I wish the HOA had not spent thousands of dollars on a pointless lawsuit. I wish Brian had not felt compelled to vandalize my property. But wishing does not change history. What happened, happened. And in the end, everyone learned something valuable. The HOA learned about respecting boundaries. Linda learned that bullying has consequences. Brian learned that vandalism is a crime. And I learned that standing firm on principle, even when it is difficult and expensive, is sometimes necessary. The settlement money, the paid snow removal jobs, and the peace that followed were nice. But the real victory was simpler. I kept my land. I kept my independence. And I proved that even a single property owner could stand up to an organization, fight back legally, and win. That is the story of how an HOA demanded I plow their parking lot, and I responded by plowing my property line and leaving theirs buried. It was petty, dramatic, and absolutely justified. and I would do it again in a heartbeat.